the area that they operate in, and look at their stories, look at their journeys, and learn from them. And see how we can take some of those lessons into our own life. Women Inspiring Network powers winning minds, and Women Inspiring Network is a pay it forward movement which has garnered more than 10 million views in the last several months since it started during the pandemic. And again, the whole idea is to bring together women achievers from different walks of life and create stories, share stories, and create a network and an ecosystem so that the next generation and people around us can learn and take inspired and take inspiration. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker for the day. Um, we have Gauri Sharma Tripathi. Now, Gauri is a really special guest today because we have been speaking a lot with content creators who are using the written word or the spoken word. And Gauri uses performing arts and Kathak dance as her medium of expression. She learned Kathak under the tutelage of her guru, Padma Sharma, who's also her mother. Gauri is the artistic director of Amara Nritya Kala, Ankh Dance in the US. She has created a 3-year degree course in Kathak for London Contemporary Dance School. And she's also, she was the first South Asian dancer to perform at the Westminster Abbey. She's curated multiple shows around the world, the Alchemy Festival, the Women of the World Festival. She's performed for television shows. She has choreographed productions for the Mahabharat and the Wawa girls. She's collaborated with many performers such as Elton John, Nitin Sawhney, Tawfiq Qureshi, and many more. And she has been a judge for the BBC Young Dancers finale. So, she's a really warm person who talks so beautifully about dance. So with that, Gauri, a warm welcome to you. Really delighted to have you here. So as we begin our event today, the first thing that I would request Gauri to do is to, quickly take us into the mood of dance and, show a little video clip, a performance clip to set the tone for the conversation. So Gauri, over to you.
Namaskar, and thank you so much, Amrita and the entire team. I'm inspired coming to this platform and to share our journey and our stories. But शुरुआत करते हैं, we begin with one of these beautiful pieces which I had done way back in the 1989, 90 for Shyam Babu, Shyam Benegal, for the series called Discovery of India, Bharat Ek Khoj. और बहुत प्यारी सी एक composition है, and I thought this will set the tone of today's meeting with all of you. So here we go with this Kathak clip of me dancing.
पियो प्याला अट बहुत ना पियो जान हाय हमारी चखो पियाला संभारी संभारी चखो पियाला संभारी संभारी कहे कनक जो आहे मतवाला कहे कनक जो आहे मतवाला कहाँ संभारे पीत पियाला बिनो पति
Beautiful. That was mesmerizing, Gauri. And I think what it makes me feel is that dance, it's not so much about just the movement and the expression, but the emotion that you're able to evoke and the emotions that you're able to convey. And I think you were saying, like, like a little bit of within the restraint of classical dance, a little bit of tarak that you bring into the uh, into what the audience sees and what the audience feels, right? Like, that's amazing.
And this is the first experience, Amrita, which I had for a screen. Otherwise, as artists, you perform on the proscenium, on the stage, or an open space. So when Shyam Babu approached my mother and he asked, "We'd like this to happen," so I had a very small, a short brief, and I had to work within that. This is my first experience to choreograph on a screen, and I was just at the cusp of college, learning, dancing, and there's so much of Josh in it. But it was a tremendous experience, just working with Shyam Benegal and the expertise, the design of the costume. So we kept it very nuanced, very much like it might have been performed in the court of Murad during the period of Aurangzeb. And there's, the glint of that nazakat, that Lucknowi andaz, the sensuality, but also keeping that spark in that performance. So just an offering to all of you.
No, fantastic. And I think during the conversation, we will learn a little bit more and try to dig out from you how, from the 360-degree, experience that we get as a viewer on the stage to the 180-degree view that you get in a film, and to now, with Zoom and it's an even constricted view, right? Yeah. We're not doing the full 180 degrees, we're a lot more limited. And how do you convey dance and motion through this limited view is something that we see as well, right? So let's go back a little bit into your journey, Gauri. And you obviously learned from your mother, Padmaji, and she was a huge inspiration in your life. But tell us a little bit more about those early years. Who else inspired you? And also, was dance something that you knew, that this was going to be a way of life for you always? Or were there other choices and paths that you examined, analyzed, and consciously, chose this path? So tell us a little bit about those early years.
Yes. Thank you, Amrita. I think while you're asking me this question, I have a couple of layers which I like to share. And as a child, I was exposed to my mother dancing. I used to accompany her for her rehearsals and for her performances. So it was somewhere there. It was always there. And the opportunities which came along with it. So there were school performances. There were these ballets that Ma would choreograph, or sometimes she'll ask me to show in a class some small composition, even though I was very tiny. But because I used to just hang out, I was just hanging out. I would say I was like a spectator to this stage of the world around me. As a tiny tot, walking around and seeing stuff and being part of a musical composition, sitting and listening to the tabla compositions being created, hanging backstage in the makeup room to a preparatory time or in between the two items when my mother would come inside. So I just became an observer to a lot of these things. And at that time, I don't realize it, but they were getting so strongly ingrained in me that I think I started, there's something called, you started getting intoxicated by it. there was that small elements which started coming into my life where I started enjoying it. Of course, we had a parallel life, and in India, education is your history, maths, physics, chemistry, which was happening, excuse me, throughout. And alongside was only this. So it was music, it was playing out, outdoor sports, creating things with mud. Because where I grew up, it was very small, very tiny town of Rawat Bhata, which is in Rajasthan. My father was setting up a heavy water plant there. So it was, you grew up in an open expanse of land and vegetation, water, mud. So my childhood was very much doing things. And organically, a lot of things happen by default, which is very interesting because, when you get paper, you start making things. When you see clay, you start creating figures from there. And that became, I think, life and the experience of where I was just added that dynamics into my formal training, which happened much later. And inspiration was music. And I remember this very well, Amrita, because now we don't see that. At that time, they were Bhil, they were the tribes which used to come and they traveled from Madhya Pradesh to Rajasthan and they were construction workers. So they were, because the whole colony was being built, this was a huge colony of, these workmen who came, and each evening, what was so beautiful was if I describe it in the dusk, time when the sun is setting, you could hear the sound of this chorus tribal music that was coming, and then the thumping of the feet and the sand, which will go up, and it created a beautiful haven. We would run out to go and see these Bhil tribals dancing. So that was the way they celebrated each evening, was this communal dance in this huge circle. जो हम लोग किताबों में आप पढ़ते हैं कि this used to be folk dance which used to happen. I have witnessed it. In between, there was huge fire that will come and they'll dance. So I think these instances, the freedom I had at that very young age, my parents gave me a great fertile bed to start thinking and start feeling the soil around, and that is what I think inspired me to just be what I am, and keep looking at that. So
it's amazing how much of if you're not orchestrated and confined into a very defined structure, so much of creativity springs out of this freedom, right?
And you're correct, because it's been said that my mother will of course say this, that I was completely out of control, so I had to be kept quite tight, because as I used to sit in dance practices, so I knew the choreographies well in advance. So if somebody made a mistake, I would say, oh no, this is not correct. So it was beautiful, because when a child is given that freedom to just be and explore, and that I think is a great thing as a parent. We must allow. There was never a no. It was okay, try it. You go in the mud, you're playing in the sand, you're creating things. It's fine. You come and wash your hand and you come back to it. And I think that was very instrumental in trying things in life, and failing, falling, and getting up. So bindas, it's okay. You carry on. That fearlessness, I think, really came at that period of time in my life. Those 8 years were my formative years, where I didn't have to behave in a particular way. I just was free to explore, free to observe, free to be, and then perhaps get anchored much later when things started getting structured. So it's interesting. Actually, today talking to you, I just realized that it was quite dynamic in early ages, early stage for me.
And I think, perhaps it's the safety angle that we see with girls. But I do remember having a lot more freedom when I was growing up in my early years, which changed, I think, probably around the time I was 10. Maybe the environment around us was changing. I don't know what it was, but I think that early freedom for girls, especially,
Yes.
is so much more important in.
And Amrita, just one point which comes in is certain things which I explored then when I was 10, 11 years old, I have brought in now in my choreographic work by default. And these imageries are so unique now to our present moment of time because we don't see that environment that we grew up in. And I remember, like, Abhi, it's monsoon time, Savan, the Jhula comes in. There was a piece which I created at the South Bank, Queen Elizabeth Hall, when for the entire piece, I had the swing and the entire stage. There was a dancer who just went back and forth. And of course, a whole story was built out of that in a dance form. But this whole installation of a swing going back and forth was brought in way back when we used to put the swing and swing on it, and that was a playtime for us. So it's very interesting how you juxtapose something so fresh and you bring it where it becomes a very mature portion of an installation and thought and idea for a performance.
So take us a little bit, we saw that wonderful performance that you did for Bharat Ek Coach. So take us a little bit through your journey, you were in college, you had this experience, and then I know, from a distance, we know that you have moved countries, continents, you established yourself in a new area. So tell us a little bit about, what happened, what was the journey like? What were those early experiences in setting up, the ecosystem?
So college was, I studied in Sophia College in Mumbai. Again, it was a very fertile ground because we did a lot of competitions. And, when the girls would get together and say, okay, let's do this, there's a competition happening in IIT Mumbai. So we'll set up a piece and we'll take it. So that was the time when we did a lot of experimentation with folk, classical work, theater, music. That was again a very interesting point where you started creating things in a collaboration. So the whole element of being a lonely rider became a collaborator. And that college really gave me a great forum to explore and experiment and take these ideas forward. And of course, at that time, Amrita, also opportunities started coming because I was doing full-on classical Kathak performances, which was again now very rare. The zamane mein we used to have like 1.5 to 2 hours. That was a normal solo Kathak performance. So I was trained as a soloist. I always performed as a soloist with my whole entourage of musicians and a full performance. So you had a whole, marg in which you moved. You had taranas, ritumaries, and you held the stage for an hour and a half with your content and your physical stamina. But also at the same time, I think what was happening in India was a lot of these serials were being created. So I also became part of Mahabharat by B.R. Chopra. So I played a role of Urvashi because of the big dance piece which Gopi Krishna ji choreographs. That was again because dance became the main route of my entry into these different mediums of sharing the ideas. And then was Bharat Ek Khoj, which I shared with Shyam Benegal, and a couple of other things which happened at the same time. One was very interesting, which led me to, this was at the cusp of my moving away from India. Life brought me out from Mumbai and I moved away. But there was a dance ballet called Punyatirth Bharat, which I had created for an organization called Yuvak Biradari, basically training non-dancers. So we had a lot of young people from all over Maharashtra, and we traveled, we created this whole serial, I would say, moving serial for 2.5 to 3 hours on the stage on the history of India. And that's what brought me really into the whoops, pushed me in the mainstream of what is stage performance is, how you create an idea and you put that through. And perhaps that was the time when a lot of things were changing, and life brought me out from Mumbai actually to Nigeria for 2 years. Yeah, so that went missing. So I was there for 2 years, and of course, coming to a place called Port Harcourt, which is in the River State, which was quite out of the thing. But I used to come back to India because I had a lot of my other music and dance commitments to keep doing. So I would go back and forth. What I managed to do was throughout this transformation of moving geographically, India was always my route. So I would always come back for the concerts and festivals and then go back. So the work actually doubled up. And I started calling Janmabhoomi being India, But Karma Bhumi soon became the world stage. And that's where the doors started opening into a very different life and very different way of looking into dance. So it was Nigeria to Switzerland, and then Switzerland to United Kingdom, London. So London became home, but each place, dance was my tool. That is the only thing I had. Other than, just the passion of doing it, the passion of saying, no, we can do it. And because I wanted to communicate to everyone and share, I started transforming the ways we could take Kathak to these different avenues. So in Nigeria, we used to go to the village, and they are fantastic storytellers. So I would go, and then the youth club will have these exchange. So I'll show them rhythmscapes. They were, excellent with the rhythm. So we'll have this conversation of like Kathak rhythms, takadhina, takita, takadhina, takita, takita, tikita, takita, tikita, takita, takita, takita. So it was fantastic. It just opened up, it was like you opened up a knot which was there in your system. You say, oh my God, we can reach a different culture through just the vocabulary of Katha. So that made me brave. That made me brave. So the geographical location changed. Every time it came to a new place, you evolved. You look back into what you had learned, your riyas, your discipline that you had done all these years, soon started coming out in a very positive way of reaching out and sharing. So that became quite an interesting journey for me, and quite liked doing it because it was free as well, fearlessly. It was a new territory. Coming to India was always doing your classical work, traditional performances, building up on your ballet work. But then this allowed you to breathe slightly differently.
No, that's amazing. I remember, a story is coming to mind. So there was a performer called Rosa Montoya who used to flamenco dancer, and she had collaborated a lot with Kathak artists. And I was a student at Berkeley at that point of time, and I saw her for the first time because, there were performances that she was doing there. She was a local Bay Area artist. And you just realize that there are so many similarities that we have across cultures, and there is so much of rich pickings from traditions and heritage of different places, which can really enhance what we do today, right? So yeah.
It is wonderful. When I was there for a year in Switzerland, in Lausanne, but managed to work with Ballet Béjart, and there was a dancer called Dominique Gavella. We exchanged and we worked on the five elements, their understanding as a ballet, and she's a Martha Graham style of training. So a dialogue between two women again became quite extraordinary, and we were able to share. We created a piece of choreography on five elements. So this is, you can reach out, and I always feel that if your tool, if you've done the rigor, if you've done the riyas, and you've understood the volume of the grammar, then you can write it in a slightly different way in order to reach a different culture. And I think it's absolutely fine, because it just makes us very human to keep trying and uniting yourself through the rhythms, through the movements, through stories. So that became quite fun for me.
So before we get to UK, let me just ask you to unpack that particular statement a little bit for us, right? You said that if you really learn it at a different level, right, you can create, and once you know the grammar, you can create things. So what is it in your viewpoint, because you've been a performer, you've seen a lot of your students go from being a student to performer. So what does it take really to go from student to performer to a composer?
So Amrita, the basic is the integrity of the form. The integrity of the form has to be maintained. Like we have as I say, the grammar, the the takkar, the compositions, the hastas must be understood and practiced, keeping the philosophy of the art form alive. And that is what I did in Kathak, because my mother is like that. Ma never experimented. So she came from a school of thought which was exactly how it was taught by the guru, has been maintained even now at her age 82. She still dances, and it's like her Guruji is transformed. But that is what she did, and she did tell me that, Gauri, this is what I can do, but you're a thinking dancer, so you can apply it, and you can only apply it if you're good in your grammar. So the choice was, you had to do your practice. You just could not get out of it. You could not say, okay, now I've done 3 years and I'm done. No, every single day I practice. And if I did not wear my ghungroos with all the other paraphernalia happening, it was almost like you missed out on something. So I always tell my students, that's the time when you bank your riyaz, your discipline, your rigor, and your body becomes tuned. That is when you're tuning your instrument, which is your body as a dancer. So we cannot take a shortcut on that. So that my basic was, and that is a basic my mother did, and she did not. If I missed a day, I could see her body language. She would be very angry, and she was. So that was our basic in the house. We could not miss practice, holding it with integrity. So I will always show her the experiment, and she'd say, "Yeah, actually that worked." So for me, it was holding that, and at the same time, from a teacher's point of view, from a guru's point of view, she allowed me to fly with what was taught. And that I thought was absolutely unique, because once I came out, many people did not have that opportunity. So even if I fell, she was there to hold and let you bounce back out of it. And I think that is such an important thing for a teacher and a guru, to allow that thing happening and then adhere then to move on, because it's a constant. We cannot reach on one go. We have to have these steps to go on. So the basic was the riyaz, the integrity of the form. Once that is with you, then you start seeing other things through a different lens. But what holds you like a kite, what holds you is that grammar, is that integrity, that authenticity of the art form, of the dance that I did with Kathak. So I might choreograph a lot of things, my mind would think, my eye will see it in a different way. But when I dance,
Hmm.
it is that. So it's interesting, I go into a very different realm on that. But it was a rigor, body, practice, discipline, and try not to break it. And have a joy in that Monday. It could become Monday. Every day you're doing the same thing. But you started seeing a little spice in it. You started feeling, because your body was changing. You were, from a teenager, you're grown up, your body started changing. You started appreciating yourself as an artist, as a dancer, as a woman. And that became a real, again, I use this word many times, intoxication. उसको हम लोग नशा कहते हैं. ये अलग चीज का नशा था, नशा of yourself, which is also great as a woman, that you enjoyed your own presence, because you had something so strong to hold on to.
And it's different now, isn't it, Corey? Because we can see ourselves, like, you can perhaps see yourself perform, you can see videos, but when you started out, it was really audience appreciation,
So
right?
true.
Which was your mirror.
So true. And this in this journey, I will share this. It's my father who was, because at that time, reviews were written, and review means solid review, and these were all well-known writers. Of course, we have Sunil Kutari, who we lost last year, but a lot of Prakriti Kashyap, Hima Devi. These were absolutely top-notch, critical eye, and these were critical reviews. Critical reviews means you need to have some criticism, and as a dancer, we were also trained to face the criticism, face what is called a feedback. Now, if you get a feedback, you feel, oh my God, why did you say this? I thrived on feedback. And I should really open Times of India at that time, used to open to see if I did a performance at the NCPA, because that was a real honest thing. And if you don't get a feedback, then you don't grow. And it was very important from an audience point of view what was coming our way. So that was very, very important to get the audience response, of course, the applause. And let me tell you this, Amrita, one show, it was all young people. And it was interesting because that was a turning point in my life. I went to the stage, it was very traditional composition, which I had done. And there were few people who booed me. And I'm saying this on the platform. Boot means, oh, go, 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 because they wanted to see the next, which was a Lavani performance happening after the Kathak performance. So it was interesting because as a young one, we said, oh my God, I've done this, great musician, great costume, everything. But an audience member was more keen to watch a Lavani, which is fine, which had, but it also shifted my understanding of selection of items,
Hmm.
selection of forums where I should perform, where I should not perform, and what should be taken up. So, as youngsters, you falter. It's great because then you start learning through that journey to make it better. So then I became a bit more selective, a bit more conscious, and created things which had very different dynamics within the traditional format that we used to perform. So, yeah, audience response, feedback, to a clap, to an audience member walking out of your concert, or having a standing ovation, which we did 2 years back at the Bandra Festival. For an outdoor performance, everybody stood up and applauded. So I think these are momentary but fantastic because that gives you the vitamin to keep going, right?
You
Keep
know,
going.
it's the real thing, right? Like, it's that audience interaction. But let's go back again to the UK, right? You've been through multiple countries now, Nigeria, Switzerland, and you're in the UK, and you have, like, such a fantastic set of, like, in hindsight, these associations that you've, managed, like, to do, from the BBC to the performance at the Westminster Abbey to, partnering with and collaborating with Elton John and so on. So how did you get started on that journey over there? Because you're a newcomer, you have you have your history, legacy, of course, but how do you start and how do you build?
Amrit, that's a very interesting question because when you come out of India, and I will say that you take your CV, you had a file of your photographs, your press reviews, because you have done heavy, hardcore work in a setup. But when I came to UK has had dancers who were settled there already. It was a blank canvas for me, absolutely blank canvas. I really didn't know anyone there. And the first performance I did was at the Bharati Vidya Bhavan. And I still remember Dr. Nanda giving me a check of £70, which was quite a lot at that time. But it was something which really gave you a boost in to believe that you can make a difference. But interestingly, from that blank canvas, I had to leave everything what I had done behind. And people did say, "It's fine. You've done that in India. We want to see what you do here. So come back to us after 6 months." And I remember this, which happened to me. I came back home and I said, "Oh my God, I have nothing. I have just myself and a conviction." Uh, and so slowly, an opportunity happened, an opening happened to teach. And that's where my teaching thing started, which was interesting. Before that, it was more performance and choreographing and moving out. The systematic teaching started. And I have my first student, her name is Hainal, and she's still there in London. I had 4 students when I started in Wembley, and I used to stay in central London, and I used to trek by tube, and I'll go there every week, 2 to 3 times a week. And from 4, we build up slow and steady number of students. So I felt that teaching really brought me and a systematic approach um, that gave me a little, sort of a belief that this is possible. And then, of course, the opportunity performances also started happening. And then started happening after those 6 months of building up something where people could say, "Oh, that's interesting." That's when interesting collaborators started coming in, people started approaching you, new spaces open, new ideas happen, new people who were promoting music and dance became part of your journey. And that I think was fantastic because you needed that, your warm up. As we do, the warm up time was very much required to open the doors in London and the UK. And then it moved on from the proscenium space for solo performances to choreographing contemporary dancers to writing the degree course to building up our own ARC Dance UK team. Slowly we built up and started performing to site specific work where we took dance performances outside in the open. So curating, we did performance for the Olympic torch. So performance wise, a lot of interesting things started happening. It was like it was like a puzzle, of different parts coming in. But the platform was always Kathak. The platform was Kathak, but these simple different cubes were of different ideas, different collaborators, European collaborators, school projects, projects happening in the hospital. It was like a floodgate which opened up of possibilities. And I would say this is surely because you believed in it and you wanted to do it. And every time, you searched and you looked for something which you said, okay, I believe in it and I will be able to produce. And you started creating Amrita, which I never done. Of course, we used to do research and development and R&D time, thinking time. We became much more structured in the way I approached things, in the way I started systematically building up, where it was from music to costume to set to light to the physical work. And that became fantastic. Every project, you learn something new and you brought it out. So that's how we build up. UK became totally my karma bhumi. So beautiful.
So, so many ideas to explore over there, Gauri. First is like, just liberating dance from the stage to, and each time you create for a different medium or a different channel, I'm sure you were able to take it to a new set of audience, right? Which perhaps then changes you as a dancer, does it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's also about conversations. Otherwise, when you're dancing yourself, you have a conversation with your musician and you're internalizing the idea. Here it was about collaborating with cross arts, and artists and dancers from different milieus coming together, collaborators coming together and wanting to create something which we believed in. There was a particular idea. How do we reach that? How do we reach that platform? And festivals. So a lot of the festival work started happening at the same time. So this is something which I felt was tremendous. It was like a fuel which was added to the fire which was already burning in a positive way. So that's something which I really think UK provided me with that fertile ground.
And you are the second in that generation, right? And you created like this whole landscape, and you've done this a second time over when you came back to India and you started again, though, I'm sure you were connected to India through the years. So how do you feel now that you're seeing your daughter getting into the space? How do you see the space itself is changing? Is it not? What is your view on that?
Okay. So in the journey, like when I said, when I started, the Kathak dancers who started with me, for example, Heenal, Payal, Seema, they were young girls of 10 and 11, 8, 9, 10, 11, and they are still part of the ARC Dance UK team. They're still practicing Trishna. So there's a whole core group of 10 of them who became part of the initial learning and have continued that thread. So I call them as my, not just my daughters, but they have also been my participants in my journey as a dancer as well. So they performed with me. And of course, the phase went into creation, leaving it because there was a need for us to move back, which was a conscious decision. We decided to come back because my daughters were growing up, and I felt it was also important for them to have the time with their grandparents. But more importantly was also that Tarani would have time with my mother. At that time, there was no guarantee that Tarani, the third generation, would be involved in dance and would take up dance in a way because she was still in grade 12. And, of course, things changed and we came back here. Answering your question whether things have changed in India, I would say it hasn't. It hasn't changed too much. Where I had left I came back, it almost felt like time had stopped in terms of, the way things were done. In fact, I would say it has gone back a little bit. At that time, we had many more concerts, much more of an audience which was there. There were all night concerts. There was much more vibrance, which I saw as a young kid through my mother's generation, with dances like Tara Devi, Gopi Krishna, Abbaji. A lot of these doyens of music and dance really came together and worked and It was very, very alive at that time. So when I came back now, last couple of years, I think it's still in a similar process. I just feel arts need to have much wider and a stronger presence in our community, in our social structures, because a lot of women are taking it up. We have to create careers out of it, and we have to make it part of a curriculum which becomes, it's on onset from an earlier age. So I think some things have not changed. Some things are still the same. In fact, sometimes I do feel that we have regressed a little bit. As I said, earlier it was much more vibrance of it. And I hope we are able to bring a change. We are able to bring it out in a much more of a stronger space where we believe in our arts in India more strongly. We have the funding. We support the artists. We give them platforms to try the R&D, and if they fall, it's okay. We need to create opportunities. Otherwise, we lose generations coming into it. We were the scaffold in which Tarani can stand, or the other dancers who are wanting to do can be there, because we believed in our rigor, we believed in it. I think it's so important that we need to create structures and systems to cradle this. And artists need cradling, artists need appreciation. Other than the financial support, I think that is the other impetus, much, much more strongly required at the moment.
Yeah, and you need the freedom to sort of experiment as well, right? Which your generation, which you did.
Absolutely, Amrita. And also, forums like when I was at the South Bank, I was residence for 10 years. No question asked. We created, as a resident artist, we were given the freedom. We need to create residencies. We need to create a lot of these forums where students and youngsters just don't dance because they need to get the grades. They should dance because that perhaps can become a mantra of life. Perhaps that they can take it as a career. Perhaps not just dance, but so many other things they can do with dance that can be a career as well. So that is something we need to, bring out. We have to open a door. We need that fresh breeze coming into our system now.
No, I totally, concur what you said. That I also remember, attending so many more concerts
Yeah.
when I was younger, dance, music, and there used to be if you look at any of the festivals, you would have 7-day, 10-day, music festivals, and performers from across the country would come and perform and so on. And that atmosphere and where it democratized dance, it was not in the stage, but it was in these created stages, where a lot more people and children could view and experience things. That is not happening anymore. So that's really a space where things need to be done. But tell me, just a question going back to the 3-year course that you created. How different is it from the structured thing that you learn in India? And it's coming from because when I learned, I've learned in a very traditional way, but when I met friends who had grown up in the US and they had learned from teachers within the US, the style was a lot more performance oriented, a lot more of a different style of learning that they had gone through than the very traditional build up on the elements and the basics and take it from there kind of a style that we had gone through. So how is it in London, and how do you think it should evolve in the future?
Okay. So the inception of it started with something called ISTD, Imperial Society of Teachers of Dance. So dancers, Sushmita Ghosh, Sujata Banerjee, myself, Pushkala Gopal, some of the dancers initiated by Academy, and a lady called, very dynamic lady called Meera Kaushik, who actually got us together to come and think, to create a syllabus. This is the first thing that we did. So we created a Kathak and a Bharatnatyam syllabus. And I still remember I wrote the first specifications of the syllabus. And it was a Herculean task because we have such a dense vocabulary. How do you simplify? How do you funnel it to make it accessible and easy, so you don't have 50 tukras, but you just have 6 tukras. And those 6 tukras will need the elements of A, B, C, and D. Because as an examiner, you're going to just look at that. So that's where the first time I saw how a structure was created in the syllabus. So if I track down, and I know Padmaji will speak about it, but this Mohan Rao Kalyanpurkar ji, he created the first syllabus in India. I think 1958 for the Sangeet Natak Academy sort of gave a structure to Kathak. But since then, we had evolved quite a bit. So when we did the ISTD syllabus, it was quite challenging to segment it. So we created grade 6, 1 to grade 6 on that. After creation of that, a lot of us started doing the ISTD exams. In fact, we still take the ISTD exams in India. So once I moved back, I brought that system here as well. Of course, we have Bhatkhande Vidyapeeth. They have the exams, and Gandhar Mahavidyalaya and Prayag. The difference is they are also written exams, Amrita. And abroad, it was very difficult for the children to write in Hindi for various reasons. And if you did an English thing, somehow it didn't have its tuning. You know, you can't learn an art form in English, to be honest. It has to have the Hindi आवश्यक है, हिंदी बोलना, हिंदी पढ़ना, हिंदी लिखना जरूरी है. तो वो एक कोशिश बहुत जरूरी है. So it was very interesting. So we created the syllabus, just the 6th grade syllabus, for a once a week training happening. So that became quite a well established. It got accredited by the QCA, and it has its plus and negative points as well. So it has not yet been embraced in India as much, but offshoot of that was a 3-year degree course, which happened for the London Contemporary Dance Trust, which I wrote for Kathak. And the idea again behind that was, how do you create a dancer? You can't create a full-time Kathak dancer, because the training for Kathak dance is much rigorous, much more rigorous. But here, the contemporary dancer who's doing contemporary dance and who's learning ballet would just get tools and ideas of Kathak dance, which perhaps they can use in their choreographies. So that was very clear from the beginning, that they will not be full-time Kathak dancers, but they are training this as an ancillary skill, if I may call it, for enhancing their contemporary dance training. So that is how we did the course, and we ran it for 3 to 4 years at the place. And it had a very interesting flavor for us as well. What we should bring in, what is the ingredients we bring in. And this actually was an offshoot of the work I had done with Akram Khan. He's a contemporary dancer. So I choreographed a lot of his Kathak solo work, which sort of had an edge in contemporary. That's where I started opening up and creating the whole level of physicality and dynamics in the art form. So that became, I think, also a tasting thing for me to try out for contemporary dancers. Why deny that experience, and why not reach to a very different audience through the syllabuses? So that's how the ISTD and the London Contemporary Dance Trust 3-year degree course came about.
So, since you mentioned physicality and dynamism, I think that's a fantastic moment for us to experience a little bit of, physicality and movement, and how do we bring something which is 360-degree experiential?
Okay, so great. So I'm going to share this with the audience. So, again, it's about the element of Kathak, but how do you reach out? So I created this. I just thought I'd share this with you all today. So there is something called Jagriti Yatra. That is a train journey which takes young people on a train journey around India in December. Every year for the last 12 years they have been doing. Basically to visit entrepreneurs and believe in India, believe in the change in India, and go to the grassroots level and see how this is happening, and believe in also entrepreneurship. So as artists, we are also entrepreneurs. We create our own ways of work which comes in. So part of that project was this. It's called the Jagriti Geet. I'm sharing it with you today, and the lyrics are written by Prasun Joshi, because it's very simple, and I'm sure each one of you will learn it like that. The idea was just to explain the movements with the lyrics. So it says, Yaro Chalo, comrades, let's go. So it's basically, you can imagine all these young people learn this, and every day they perform this for coming together, for bringing the energies together. So the words are Yaro Chalo, okay, comrades, let's move. Badalne ki rut hai, season to change. Okay, so Yaro Chalo, बदलने की रुत है, यारो चलो savarne. It's nice now to decorate here. Savarne ki rut hai. So the season is to change, season is to transform at the same time. And then it goes, I'll just walk you through. Kuch badal raha, something is changing. Kuch badlenge, we will change something else. Jab badlega, tab badle. It's okay. If it changes, it's fine. We shrug our shoulder. Kuch dekha hai, we see something. कुछ देखेंगे, we will continue to observe it. कुछ लिखा है, some things are written in history and some we will create ourselves. कुछ लिख देंगे. Then it goes again, यारो चलो, बदलने की रुत है, यारो चलो, सवरने की रुत है. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. I think it's very simple. So let's try this. And we'll end with the musical small section, which opens up, close, open up, close, open up, close, and then it goes into this way. So we'll try this much, everybody. So relax. That's why I wanted you to participate, because it's on a chair. You don't need to get up. And whatever you're wearing, you're looking great, all of you out there. But just join me together on this. Come. Okay, let's go. So this is dedicated to all the young students and the youth who have been traveling in India and will continue to discover the beauty of this country and believe in change. So here we go. Let's go.
कुछ बदल रहा, कुछ बदलेंगे, तब बदलेगा जब बदलेंगे. कुछ देखा है, कुछ देखेंगे, कुछ लिखा है, कुछ लिख देंगे.
Hey, we'll repeat again.
कुछ बदल रहा, कुछ बदलेंगे, तब बदलेगा जब बदलेंगे. कुछ देखा है, कुछ देखेंगे, कुछ लिखा है, कुछ लिख देंगे. यारो चलो, यारो चलो, बदलने की रुत है. यारो चलो, यारो चलो, संवरने की रुत है. यारो चलो, बदलने की रुत है. यारो चलो, संवरने की रुत है.
Okay, I think everybody should have got that. It was, yeah, it has a different feel to it, and I'm glad. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we are coming at that point, Gauri, where we would like to invite Padmaji and Tarani on our discussion as well. A warm welcome. And let me just introduce Guru Padma Sharma. It's a real privilege, Padmaji, to have you here. So Padmaji
Thank you so much. Okay.
has been a Kathak exponent and performer, and for the last 5 decades. She graduated from Lucknow University. She had studied under Guru Mohan Rao Kalyanpurkar and done her Bhatkande Sangeet Mahavidyalaya degree in those years. And then from there, she went on to train under Guru Lachu Maharaj. And she has also trained briefly with Gurus Shambhu Maharaj and Birju Maharaj. She's also learned vocal music, which is amazing because she's the rounded artist where you have to bring together dance, music, tal, rhythm, expression, right? And it's fantastic how artists earlier really brought together all these elements and and learned and borrowed from different traditions into the main form that they were in. She's given numerous performances through the ages. She's been a solo dancer in multiple ballets, dance dramas in India, abroad, won multiple awards like Shringar Mani, Sarang Dev Fellowship, Shivali Nritya Shiromani, Nritya Vid, Sangeet Prakash, and many more. She's performed, as I said, around the world, but she's also performed for or choreographed for Bollywood movies. So she had assisted Guru Lachu Maharaj Ji for several of the songs, including I think the ones from Teesri Kasam and Pakiza with Meena Kumari. And
Yes.
she's been a poet. And again, Padmaji, this is the multifaceted artist that you are, dance, music, poetry. It's amazing. And she's also been a musical examiner. She's been a judge. She's been a part of government organizations. So many different things that you have done, and you continue to be, I think the inspiration for Gauri and Tarini for all of the things that they are doing. So welcome.
First of all, Amrita, I want to thank you for bringing me and my two daughters together on this platform. And it's really nice. And I feel emotional when I see all three of us. Because of you, we are here. Thank you.
Our privilege. And Tarini is the third generation Kathak artist and Kathak student who's learned from her grandmother, Guru Padma Sharma, and from her mother, Gauri Sharma Tripathi. And she's not just trained, but she's really been exploring the language of Kathak and taking it to new, new forms through both contemporary dance and collaborating with Indian classical performers, collaborating with contemporary artists, and so on. And she's also an athlete and a fitness coach. And again, she's taking the form of Kathak and taking it to a new area altogether, and we would love to explore that. I saw your Instagram page and it looks amazing with all the poses that you have in there, which could be some perhaps borrowed from Kathak and some from various fitness exercise forms and so on. So would love to explore that and see how you see dance evolving in your times and in the times to come.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much, Amrita. And just mirroring what my Nani said, it's a wonderful platform. Thank you for bringing us together.
So, we've had a conversation with Gauri about her journey. But of course, there is so much to unpack when you're looking at the performing arts. So let's begin with the first thing, where a lot of people learn, but ultimately it is sadhana, right? And that sadhana, that whole concept of sadhana, was something that was taught earlier on. I mean, I'm not somebody who's taken dance as my career, but I learned when I was younger, and my guru, who at that point of time was in his 70s, was still practicing every day. He was actually a tabla player, but he had learnt dance, and he was a guru of both dance and tabla. So again, art used to be multifaceted, and the amount of dedication that you would have seen, Padmaji, in your time, what you tell students. So tell us a bit about that environment, the Guru Shishya Parampara, the expectations that you had. They were much different from what a teacher can actually expect from a student today. So take us back into that time.
I started very early at my, I was 5 years old. And one thing more I want to tell you, I come from a doctor's family where there was no dancing, music, nothing. My father was a doctor, my grandfather, my brothers, they were all doctors. But my mother, she was interested in singing, and she used to play the harmonium and also sitar. So this was way back in early 1940s. So she felt, or maybe she had the urge to learn Kathak just as a hobby. So I was very small that time, and she used to go to learn from my Guruji, who later became my Guru, Mohan Raoji. So she used to go daily in the afternoon. I used to accompany her. So this was going on for some time. But slowly I started liking it. And I used to go there, sit there, and see what she's doing. So anyway, this happened around when I was almost 7 years, 7, 8 years. Then after that, I told my mother that I'd like to learn. So I got admitted in Bhatkhande Sangeet Mahavidyalaya in Lucknow. That was around when I was 10 years. And this the training was all theoretical training, practical training. There was a syllabus and the course was there. So every year there was 5 years for Visharad and then 3 more, 8 years total for Nipun. So I did all my, this was a very rigorous time for me because academics was there. I used to come in the evening for dance, for music, and also on Sundays I was painting. So I had no time to think about anything. So, so I did my Nipun from Bhatkhande. That was around 58, 59. And that same time, I was lucky to get married to my husband, who was encouraging me right from the beginning. So then what happened is that I was learning and the main training was over in the sense that I did all the course and finally it was the highest degree which I got. That was in 58. But somehow it happened that Lachu Maharaji, this was under Mr. Kallanpurkar. Something happened and then Maharaji came to Lucknow and I happened to go there to see his program in a mehfil. And there he did a thumri. And you must be knowing Lachu Maharaji, Bidyu Maharaji's uncle. So there it was a turning point for me when I saw Lachu Maharaji there. That was the first time, and that was it. He sang a thumri and did bhav, the abhinay part of dance. After that, this he was going on. I mean, for hours he was just for a single line. He used to depict so many bhavs, many bhavs. It is very difficult also, but he was superb, and the whole program was mesmerizing. And I told myself, now I have to learn. सीखना है तो इनसे ही सीखना है. Luckily, I came to Bombay and then started learning. This was the Guru Shishya Parampara which you asked for. Mohan Raoji's was just doing the course and that's it, theory part. But for Maharajji, when I came and started learning, that was Guru Shishya Parampara. Because there was no structure, nothing. He would come, we had to just go to his house, sit next to him, and he used to teach whenever he wanted. It was all his whims and fancies. Many times it happened that so many days I used to go and he did not teach even a single thing. But sometimes he would teach so much that it was difficult to absorb. So this was the Guru Shishya Parampara, and he was the master of all art form in the sense whichever the actions, the singing, everything. I like to shall I show you the tumri which he did that day. Hey, Gauri,
Yes.
can I do that?
Yeah.
It was. And he danced for almost 2 hours, doing the same tumri many times, depicting all different aspects of life and everything. So this tumri goes as झमाझम पानी भरेगी कौन अलबेले की नार झमा झम पानी भरेगी कौन अलबेले की नार झमा झम हाथे रसरिया कांधे गगरिया हाथे रसरिया कांधे गगरिया तिरछी चितवन से घायल करेरी कौन अलबेले की नार झमाझम. So this was the from him I came to this Guru Shishya Parampara.
And
Yes.
you know, the expectation from those days, like as you said, some days he would teach.
Yeah.
He wanted to teach for 10 hours or 8 hours or 4 hours.
No, he used to. My timing was 10 to 12, 2 hours.
Wow.
But in that also, sometimes I used to go there for maybe a week or so. He will not teach there. याद करो तुम जो तुमको आता है. But sometimes it depended on his mood, what he would do. But you see, I have learned, and I am a traditional Kathak dancer. I don't change. I have never changed what Maharaji has told me, and the hand gestures and bowls and everything. Whatever I have learned from Maharaji, I have kept it just alive as मतलब सच्चाई में मैंने काम किया उनके साथ. उसमें कोई there is no mixing up of things or bowls. If he has said something, तो वो वैसे मैंने किया. So I have not polluted the bowls of which people do nowadays. They just mix things from this gharana, that gharana, and make their own bowls. That I have not done. So this was, I used to assist him in his work in ballets. I have been doing his ballets. Main role I used to get, and for films also, he used to take me, and I was assisting him in 2-3 films. So मैंने ही किया है काफी कुछ, because he was sick and I did the choreography. So I have learned so much from him, choreography, and that is there, composing things, composing new bowls, composing tumris and bhajans. So that I was fully in practice when I was with Maharajji. So I was able to grasp things even while there's some film shootings. I learned so much about cinematography and choreography, lighting. So it has been real lovely journey actually.
I think what you said, Padmaji, sachai se, because that is such a critical element of taking the arts forward, that ek sachai rehni chahiye. Uske baad, as Gauri was also mentioning, that there is the original, you have to know the original before
Original, yes.
that is so.
और ये तो महाराज जी का तो ये था कि he was whatever he said वो मुझे बोलना था. So I character wise I have अच्छी तरह से समझ गई थी मैं महाराज जी को. So I never said no. He never liked any of his students say no to him. You know, many a times it used to happen कि वो शाम को कहीं जा रहे हैं तो उन्होंने बोला दिन है, तो बोलते थे कि अभी रात है, तो मैं कहती थी हाँ रात है. कभी मैंने I have never ever said no to him. बिकॉज अगर मालूम भी होता है तो भी मैं नहीं बोलती थी कि आपने ऐसा कहा. बट ही वॉज अ जेम, ही वॉज अ जेम ऑफ अ पर्सन. आई वॉज सो लकी टू हैव मोहन राव जी इनिशियली एंड देन लेटर ऑन महाराज जी, विच मैं अभी भी उनका तो याद करके उनका नाम से वो करती हूँ. वट एवर आई टीच, आई हैव वट एवर आई हैव लर्न, आई हैव taught in a very honest way. I can say that.
And do you continue to practice today, Padma?
Yes, I practice, but not now. My age is, I'll be 83 in September. So I practice, I teach, I performed on this in NCPA. In Lucknow, I performed in 2018. So little bit of performances there off and on. Or anything else, huh?
You know, आपने जो गाया, like, you know, it was so beautiful. So
I just felt like because this was the Thumri which Maharaj Ji, first time I met him and he sang and did Abhinay on it. So that this is very important for me because I changed myself. I mean, my life was changed. So I learned from him. And he never ever said no कि नहीं तुम सीखने नहीं आओ. वो लक की बात है. तो जस्ट ये अच्छे गुरु मिले तो फिर, और उनसे मैं कभी बोल भी नहीं सकती थी कि आपने ये क्यों किया या कैसे किया. जो उन्होंने कहा वो किया. He knew me, that's why he taught me.
I think वो like एक if your guru is the आईना और उस आईने में आप अपने आप को like, you know, like उतार लेते हो.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. You know, you when you dance, the छवि of your guru is always there. You can make out ये किसके शागिर्द हैं ये, तो ये मालूम हो जाता है. Just अंग is a very important thing. अंग कैसा होगा तो वो, and he was last के शहंशाह माने जाते हैं.
But also, Amrita, I'm just coming in. It was also the tradition of questioning, no questioning, only
No questioning. That's what I told you, that अगर दिन है तो हम कहते थे हाँ दिन है, अगर रात भी होती थी तो बोलते थे. तो उनको आर्ग्यूमेंट में क्यों डालती मैं लड़ती या वो करती. बहुत से बच्चे आते थे तो उनको नहीं पसंद है, they used to go, वो कहते थे जाना है तो जाओ, मेरा नहीं सुनना है तो नहीं सुनना. He was very अजीब किस्म के दिमाग था उनका.
But therefore, now this generation, we question. We are constantly questioning. We constantly question. So that's
yeah. ये क्यों हुआ. These days अभी बोलते हम क्यों नहीं कह सकते थे. That is why whatever I teach गौरी और तारिणी, तो मैं वही सिखाती हूँ जो मैंने सीखा. जब हाथ अगर ऐसे गया तो वैसे ही जाएगा जैसे सीखा. वो बात अलग है कि मैं I innovate so many actions and bowls and all. That is different. But जो उनसे सीखा है वो वैसा का वैसे. कहीं भी कोई भी there's no pollution in it. जैसे आजकल मिक्स करते हैं कि रॉक एंड रोल भी हो गया है, बॉलरूम डांसिंग भी कथक में आ रहा है, सब किस्म से कर रहे हैं. बट द ऑथेंटिसिटी जो कथक में है वो बहुत मुश्किल है कायम रखना, बिकॉज बहुत इधर उधर से चीजें पोल्यूशन होके मिक्स हो जाती हैं, तो वो ऑथेंटिक नहीं रहती. अगर ऑथेंटिक है और नींव आपकी पक्की है तो कभी भी कोई चीज गलती नहीं होगी. यू कैन इनोवेट, यू कैन चेंज द एक्शंस, जो मैं करती हूँ अपने. जब मुझे करना होता है कंपोज, आई चेंज. बट ओरिजिनल जो था वो मैंने अभी तक संजोए रखा है कथक में.
And that is so important to you know, carry it forward in the tradition.
Carry it forward के अलावा जब ये अब आगे की जनरेशन को तो मालूम होना चाहिए कि सही क्या था. अभी हाथ कहीं भी उठाते हैं, कहीं भी कुछ करते हैं. मिक्सिंग बहुत हो गई है आजकल, हर चीज में मिक्सिंग।
I think
और मैं कथक तो ठीक है सीखा, बट आई वॉज अ भरतनाट्यम डांसर अर्लियर. आई डिड माई अरंगेट्रम, then my guruji went away to Madras, and then I started Kathak. I joined Bhatkande, and anyway, it is a long journey.
that is amazing कि आपने भरतनाट्यम भी सीखा, फिर उसके बाद
Bharatanatyam I did full course, then I did Kathak. और कथक में हम बहुत काम किया है, बहुत बैलेज, सोलो परफॉर्मेंसेस, पिक्चर में महाराज जी के साथ में बहुत सीखने को मिला, और उन्हीं की वजह से मैं आज कुछ भी एक कोई शब्द दे दे तो हम गा सकते हैं या नाच सकते हैं. तो लाइक दैट ये है ना, तीसरी कसम का जो गाना है, नौटंकी का गाना है एक्चुअली, इट्स नॉट कथक. तो जब उनको महाराज जी को मिला ये कि ये आप कोरियोग्राफ करें, तो कहने लगे अरे नौटंकी, तो नौटंकी तो मुझे नहीं आती बोले. तो देन ही टोल्ड मी कि तुमने तो थीसिस लिखी है ऑन उत्तर प्रदेश के लोक नृत्य, उसमें तो नौटंकी होता है, तो व्हाई डोंट यू कम एंड डू द कोरियोग्राफी. बट ही वाज सिक आल्सो. तो फिर वो मैंने आई यूज्ड टू गो 6 o'clock in the morning, जो कुछ मैं सीखती थी या जो कुछ मैंने कंपोज किया वो उनको दिखाती थी, एंड देन आई यूज्ड टू गो टू द स्टूडियो. श्री साउंड स्टूडियो दादर में है, वहाँ होती थी शूटिंग. तो वो है, वो गाना भी है, बिकॉज नौटंकी आई वाज इन माय थीसिस, नौटंकी का चैप्टर. एनीवे, सो मैं देखती थी और फिर मैंने उनका किया. वो इस हिसाब से मुझे सीखने को भी मिला, और भी पिक्चरों में मैंने साथ में किया है. ये पाकीज़ा में ठाड़े रहियो बाके यार जो गाना है वो है. अच्छा, और एक नजर है, बेनजीर है, ये दिल किसको दूं, और ये पान खाए सैया हमारो इज माय कोरियोग्राफी.
Can you demonstrate a little bit?
है
आगे बता दो.
हाँ, अभी करती हूँ. अच्छा, पान खाए सैया हमारो, सांवली सूरतिया, होठ लाल लाल, हाय हाय मलमल का कुर्ता, मलमल के कुर्ते पे छीट लाल लाल, पान खाए सैया हमारो. तो ये तो मैंने ऐसे ही कह दिया. आपने गुरु शिष्य परंपरा पूछा ना, तो मैंने कहा ये सब हमने सीखा है महाराज जी से. अच्छा, उनका सिखाने का तरीका भी बहुत अजीब सा था. वो मुझको दादर स्टेशन पे बस स्टॉप पे छोड़ने आते थे, और जब आते थे तो आई यूज्ड टू वेट फॉर द बस. ही यूज्ड टू स्टैंड देयर, रुके रहते थे वो कि जब तक बस मिलेगी. तो फिर मुझसे कहते थे देखो जो यहाँ से चल रहा है, जो यहाँ से जा रही हैं लड़कियां, उनको देखो कैसे चल रही हैं, कैसे किसी की चुटिया यूं यूं हिल रही है पीछे, किसी का कुछ है, ये देखो, और कल सुबह आके मुझे बताना कि ये कैसे चल रही थी. गत की चाल लो और वही चीज चल के बताना. ऐसे उन्होंने नायिका भेद जो है ना, वो आप समझती होंगी ना, नायिका भेद जो जैसे विरहनी नायिका है, पासक सज्जा, तो ये सब, और ये बताओ देख के कि वो कौन सी नायिका है. तो इस तरह से उनका सिखाने का तरीका था महाराज जी का. और तो उनको वही लगता था. मैं कहती थी महाराज जी अगर आप ऐसे सिखाएंगे तो कोई किसी दिन गाली बकेगा आपको कि देख रहे हैं, फिर उसको वो करे. कोई भी लड़की अगर कोई सड़क पे जा रही है और कहेगी तुम जो है जैसे वो कर रही है, कल मुझे दिखाना वो क्या है, कैसे नाच रही है, और या उसकी चाल क्या थी, वो चाल अपने डांस में लो. ऐसे सीखा है मैंने.
It was experiential learning.
absolutely real life, right?
Real way of doing it.
That's amazing. So, Gauri, you started saying about how teaching and learning is very different today, right? Not just in terms of the commitment, because I find that kids have so many opportunities and they are, they want to be stretched in so many different directions. So for them to find like that one thing that they want to follow takes a long period of time, right, while you're a teacher. And also like this whole notion of questioning is there, and they may also have not seen many things, like so my daughter, who's also been learning Kathak, and I see her teacher like actually telling them what is a kua, what is a panghat. They have never seen those things, they don't know what it is.
Correct, correct.
So how do you teach, and how do you sort of ensure that your students today, like the younger generation, actually like uh, is able to grasp it and is able to take it forward? And maybe like Padmaji, if you also say like from your students today, like how are you able to stretch them to the fullest to experience and explore dance? Like how is it different now compared to like say 20 years ago?
I think Ma, will you like to go first? Then I.
हाँ, तुम बोलो बोलो क्या करें?
Yeah, आप बताएं.
नहीं बताओ, तुम बताओ.
Okay. So Amrita, I think it is why I came in between sometimes was because I felt that whole element of surrendering and questioning was a very different methodology of teaching. Now, if you just say, this is it and this is what it is, because I was not trained like that. Though Ma had a very strict training, and she was, her personality was that she never questioned, but when she taught us, she allowed us to explore other things. So she did not.
I never stopped you. Yes.
Yeah. So this was just a personality way of. So there's no the right or the wrong. It's just as a personality how confident you are also to let go on the training and allow your students to become performers. Because that was another very interesting challenge at the time, that a lot of the teachers would not let go of the students for them to fly. So it was very interesting dynamics of different times and personalities, perhaps teaching as well. For me, it has been a very organic way of teaching, because I think a lot of the feelers come from them as well. Some students want a structure, so we have a very tight structure. Some students thrive in a non-structured way, because I have got quite a few students who are in homeschooling. They have never been to school. So with the moment I do these structured repetition, they lose interest. So I think we had to tweak every now and then different groups with different stimuluses, different entry points. And that's something I've also enjoyed. I've very much enjoyed. And yes, that experiential learning, which they were
correct. That's
and we had seen, कि कैसे चाल चल रहा है, कैसे पनघट है भी, देखा भी है. Whereas how can you do? So this was a very interesting conversation we had. Couple of almost a year ago, there were these young teenagers who were growing up who actually questioned, why do we have to do thumris of Cherchar? And which was logical, which was absolutely logical. So when I spoke to Ma, there was quite a very interesting discussion. We allowed that discussion and we titled it not radical, radical, because Radha was a pivot of it. Radha ki churiyan kar gayi sari thumriyon mein is that chhedchhad. But in this present generation, that chhedchhad doesn't go down very well. So how do you maintain it?
जैसे अमृता ने कहा कि पनघट जो कथक या कोई भी इंडियन क्लासिकल सीखे, he should know the language और उसको the ambience of Indian जगहों के, गांव के, बगीचों के सब. अब जैसे पनघट किसी को मालूम नहीं होगा, जिसने देखा नहीं वो क्या पनघट कर सकता है. तो ये आना बहुत जरूरी है. And especially I always say to my students कि जब तुम मात्राएं गिन रहे हो तो 1 2 3 4 में गिनो. 1 2 3 4 में you cannot. जब फास्ट हो जाता है तो even if तिहाई, if you have to say a तिहाई, 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 वो बेताला हो जाएगा, वो हवा अलग से निकल जाती है. सो हिंदी आना बहुत जरूरी है. अगर कथक करो, कोई भी करो, अगर तमिल भरतनाट्यम कर रहे हैं तो तमिल आना जरूरी है. जब तक वो नहीं आएगा तो वो आपके दिमाग में बैठेगा नहीं. तो it is very difficult कि वो आप फीलिंग अपने अंदर से भी नहीं ला सकते जब तक आप हिंदुस्तानी सीखेंगे नहीं, हिंदी नहीं सीखेंगे, तो वो भाव अभिनय कैसे आएगा? नहीं आ सकता। आप कितना भी सिखाएं बच्चों को, वो बात आएगी ही नहीं।
But I think this, for us as practitioners, we have to encourage more and more. So we need those entry points to connect with the younger generation, and also if they are questioning the radical element of dance, why it is happening, what is the spiritual level of it, if they understand the spiritual, because times are changing, but our text and all has not changed unless and until we shift it around. So वो भी थोड़ी एक सवाल है, that's a question.
And also they should learn the scriptures also, like Krishna के थोड़े से उनके जो anecdotes हैं जो आते हैं mostly ठुमरीज में, and शिवा के जैसे कुछ श्लोक्स हैं, रुद्राष्टक है, ये सब चीजें, ये थोड़े थोड़े अगर उनको आए तो उनको जल्दी समझ में आएगा, और वो अंदर से निकलेगा तो वो एक्सप्रेशन वैसे ही होंगे। तो ये बहुत जरूरी है कि थोड़ी लैंग्वेज is a must for dancers.
So Tarini, what is your viewpoint? Because you've learned Kathak, you've learned contemporary dance, you're building the two in many different ways, right? So what do you think of your own training, and then how do you then take your training to build what you're building?
I'm very satisfied with what I have learned from my gurus. Like Mohan Rao Kalyanpurkar, he taught me the vigorous part, the footwork and everything. Maharajji, from Maharajji I learned the Abhinay part of dance, and the nuances of Thumri, Bhajan, Ghazal. And you have to feel it. It comes from the heart. Only then it will come to your face and eyes. Eyes are very, very important in dance. And so once you feel something, that will definitely come
But
to show on your face.
no, it's also with Tarini how she has now taken up the
Yes.
So for me, I've lived in a sort of Guru Shishya Parampara setup, even in this new generation, because I live with my gurus. And it's a great thing, and it's not so great sometimes. Raat ko you want to sleep and something is come up, so you have to kind of pay attention. So it's wonderful because as mom, spent time with Nani when she was younger, going to rehearsals. I did the same thing. I sat in workshops when I was a kid. I saw the other senior students of mom who are in the UK performing and learning. So by the time it came my turn to learn those compositions,
She already knew.
I already knew at least the bowls of it, the syllables. So that was one thing. And of course, the generation is different. I'll pick up a little bit on the previous question you asked them as well. Is that, yes, I'm the one who questions. I'm like, why? Is there a reason behind it? Because when you're doing something, for me, especially for the younger generation, there needs to be some sort of justification behind it. That's in most things that we believe in. So that was one thing. Sometimes you have to let go. But it's when you're with a guru, when you're learning, you have to surrender to accepting. If they allow you to question them and they give you an answer, great. It depends on the guru that you're with. But it's generally a wonderful experience with Nani, and with mom. I have a different relationship with them. Mom is more regimented, more strict, more like riyaz karo, work on your technique, and that's been great because I've become a very athletic dancer, if I can say so.
Yes.
A little more, tuned in the chakkars, footwork, all of that.
Yeah, that is called the tayari. Tayari, where she's very good, very good.
Tayari. But I've now been able to work with Nani much more in the last at least 6 to 7 years. And I'm working more on what she focuses on, which is the Abhinay, and what Lakshmaraji as well is known for, is the Abhinay and the expressions of the dance form. And so that is something I'm still working on. So it's sort of an amalgamation of both. But I also have delved in other things, as you mentioned briefly. I'm a fitness coach currently. And I started that a few years ago. because I wanted to get fit for myself. I was an athlete as a child, so I swam and I played different sports, etc. But that kind of athletic journey kind of finished. So I wanted to pick up something which would help me. And I know that cross training is such an important thing that we Indian dancers don't do as much of. A lot of Western dancers do it, with contemporary and ballet. They cross train with either other dance forms or they cross train with a physical form like fitness. And I felt the benefit of that immediately. And already dance was so rigorous with the technique and the endurance and the strength. This helped me even further. So that's where I kind of dwell in right now, in a realm of both. They are very independent, but sometimes they do intersect. And I prefer them to be independent in certain ways because, as Nani mentioned, there's an authenticity to dance, which I don't like to dilute. If I'm doing Kathak repertoire, it is Kathak repertoire. Means everything is Angarka, everything is completely that. But if I'm doing something which is slightly more mixed, let's say it's contemporary and Kathak, then I will specifically mention, or express it to be that, because I don't want to portray that as a classical, which it is not. And for younger generations, I think that's one thing that we dancers, the younger dancers who are building up their work and careers, we're trying to make it relatable to a lot of the youth. Because I grew up in a family like this, so it was easy access to me. But a lot of people don't. And art is a very niche part in India, unfortunately, especially the Indian classical dance forms. So through social media, through interacting with other youth people, through picking up topics which are more relevant, you can say, or everyone can relate to, is something that I think the younger generations, me and my colleagues, are trying to do and support each other in that process and build it up as a movement.
I think we were talking with Gauri earlier on awareness, right? And a lot more is needed, especially today, to ensure that you bring in the younger people into the fold, but also there is the whole ecosystem of people who support it. And they continue to be supporters, and we've seen across the board I guess to some extent other forms of media have taken over so much of space that some of the the classical art forms have really they've been appreciated so much more overseas, right? And so what you're doing is so critical to bring different kind of people into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to add to that as well. Coming on the social media front, that's one way we can connect with a lot of people. And there are very few classical Indian dancers who've stuck to the classical form, who have gone not viral, but I would say who have grown their following and appreciation for the art and grown their audience. There are some who've also trained in classical dance, are established, but they want to make it even more relevant to the huge mass, and therefore they sort of do a fusion of such, or they add a different style, which is relatable, and I think there is space for that. I think there's space for everyone. It's just, as an audience member, as a person on a screen, what do you want to see? As artists, we would like to be more supported with audience members joining us for performances, organizations, the government supporting us more, especially for the youth artists over the last year or so. And I think one thing I would like to say, the difference I think between our generation and their generation, and even mom's generation to some extent, is that we are much more supported by each other as dancers. We don't restrict, or we wouldn't diss someone else's performance. We would go and appreciate their performance and support. There would be a lot of interaction about different choreographies or practices that we do. And I think that's something that I think mom has also experienced, that there's a lot of gatekeepers in the art field. And a lot of them are also fellow dancers who somehow have a sort of control over a certain either festival or a certain area. And I think that's one thing, at least the people I've interacted with in the art form are being a little more supportive in supporting the younger ones and building careers together and benefiting everyone. Because they know that you're benefiting someone else will benefit you in the end.
That's fascinating that, that access is so important. Gauri, yeah.
Yeah, Amrita, I just wanted to add 2 points here. One was that, which was something which Ma always did, that she always said, go and see. Because when you see, you observe, every dancer has something beautiful. As I always say, every woman is a beautiful. Because there's something, maybe her eye or maybe her hair, something is always there, which is something that you take away. So that was one thing I learned quite early on, because we were encouraged to go and see concerts, do workshops, as you sit in Kelu Babu's workshops. You were there observing painting exhibitions. So that was one. The second point I just wanted to pick up from what Tani said was about the social media. There's another thing I always tell them that you have to be a long distance runner. You cannot be a sprinter. And sprinting it happens and it goes off. But long distance runners, we are classical dancers, are long distance runners. And we have to, from an early on, tune our mind, tune our bodies, tune our systems, tune our families, so that you can keep cultivating that run through. So that was just these 2 points, just the 2 different dimensions I just wanted to add on to what Tarni said.
So let me pick on something that you mentioned, right? Like, cultivating your family. And I think Padmaji, when you started, right? You mentioned the support that you got from your husband after you got married. And Gauri, I'm sure it's the same for you, right? So
Yes.
talk a little bit about that, because as women, that's a huge factor in being able to carry on with your dreams and your passions, right? And having the courage to be there, but also
Yes.
ensuring that the ecosystem is supportive.
Yes. So
Yes.
I'll go for that first, and then Mark can come in. But I think that ecosystem is very important. But it's also left on you how you navigate it. So if you are in a family way, and if you're doing, and your career is equally important, how do you create that balance? And because you want to do both, you want to do both. So that is a very, very crucial point. And I want to emphasize here very much that one should not switch off the button after you say, okay, I have a child, now I can change. Do not do that. So I'm just talking from my experience. I did not stop. Even when Tarni was coming out, 40 days later, I was in Munich doing a production with Tarni with me in the green room. So I did not stop, because it was not the environment, it was me. Because if I fell into a comfort zone, I would have just cruised then. I wanted that little edge. That little disruption is important in life, because then it makes you work in a different way. So that was something I could not blame anybody outside. The ecosystem was there. It was me. I had to get up. I had to do it. And it was me. So I couldn't blame it on anyone, but I had to keep going. So that's something which I always tell my girls as well, who are now mothers as well, who started way back, that you cannot stop. And they all have got back into practice. I said, body is changing every day. That is your tool. And therefore, you need to work so that by the time you're Padmaji's age, we are still able to move and still able to press. So
Yes.
that's very important. So yeah, that's over to Mom now.
For me, even before marriage, I had support from my family, my mother. After that, after marriage, my in-laws did not stop me. My husband was my best critic. And he did not stop me. He used to say, if you have to dance, pakka अच्छे से रियाज करके नाचो, otherwise stop it. Don't do dancing if you are not practiced well. Don't go on stage. So this was, and this dance was a passion for me. So it, even when I had two kids, Gauri was there, and then my son also. That time also, during that period, those 9 months, I used to go to Maharaji's, and I used to sit and learn Abhinay from him. I was unable to dance. I mean, खड़े होके नाच नहीं सकती थी, और वो भी नहीं कहते थे. वो used to say कि नहीं चुप करके बैठो तुम. तो वो time भी I have utilized in learning theory part and the Abhinay part, the nuances. तो वो उससे मुझे बहुत फायदा हुआ. एक तो क्या है कि दिमाग जो your mind, is not मतलब कि सब अच्छाइयाँ दिखती हैं. If you perform or if you sing, if you do choreograph or you dance shlokas, so much of energy you get from inside within the shlokas, and especially when he was doing रुद्राष्टक, देवी की स्तुति, जो भी, तो वो उस समय में करा करती थी. एंड आई यूज्ड टू फील इलेटेड, इलेक्शन जैसे हो जाता था मुझे जब ये गौरी भी पैदा होने वाली थी. आई यूज्ड टू डू लॉट ऑफ श्लोका की कोरियोग्राफी विद महाराज जी, एंड ही यूज्ड टू से कि ये बहुत अच्छी है बात कि वो पैदा हो रही है और तुम ऐसा कर रही हो. इट वाज लाइक जैसे prayer sort of a thing. You सीख रहे हैं, श्लोक सीख रहे हैं, वो अंदर से निकल रहा है, from your heart comes to your face, it comes to your eyes. तो ये ऐसा हुआ था. I did not stop when there was so much of problem in the sense कि you were pregnant, तो कर नहीं सकते. तो I used to go and sit and learn.
I also want to add a point here. I think when we talk of marriage, it's about equal opportunity, but equal platform in which both partners can be part of this journey as well. So if my husband even did not know much about dance, but the support system was created
Yes.
because there was a genuine effort that they saw was also made from our side. So that balance was, I think, quite
Yes.
crucial to have. And also it's about giving back when the other person also needed it. So you could not be selfish, but you needed to identify moments where that balance could be created, because they're two humans and they both need the dose of support. So I think that's very important to identify and stand up and be there and not be selfish.
We agree. I mean, even in the business world, there is so much of drop off, right? As we say. And I remember one of my mentors telling me early on, make it a comma, don't make it a full stop.
Correct.
So you can have the pause, and the pause a slow down, and that's natural and inevitable. But then you need to, as you said, Gauri, it needs to come from within, that you need to pull yourself back into it and take charge of your own passion, right?
And Amrita, I'll add on, because it's not easy, and we have something called the 40-day break. So exactly on the 40th day, much to the traditional saying, you can't travel, you can't do this, I was on a flight. And I knew how much of my body had gone through the turmoil, that it was my mind over the body to cross that hurdle. And that disruption is important, like a comma, but you got to get on. If you believe in it, you got to get on, because once you get on, your deeds, your actions will help that ecosystem automatically start supporting. Because nobody's being a devil. Everybody wants to do it. It's how do you have that, how you navigate that energy and relationships is, I think, also very, very important. So,
yes, one thing, when Tarni was to be born, till the last day, Gauri was taking classes. And I used to feel nervous. But that helped you.
So that's when I found my mother shifting to become a friend of mine. Because as a friend, I told her, I said, you cannot tell me now stop, because you need to rest. If you want me to carry on, you need to support me to say, please, acha chalo, get on. So that's when the relationship from a mother-daughter became a relationship as a friend. And then we could converse, and then she could get into my system and be with me. And she supported me blindly. She broke away all her UP traditions, and she was in that journey. So that was great. That's you turn around.
Fantastic. So let's explore a little bit, and I know it's we're exceeding the time that we had said, but I'm enjoying this, so I want to carry on a little bit longer, if you're okay with it. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
So
Go ahead.
let's talk a little bit about Rachna and composition, and it takes a lot. I mean, one is the elements, right? Like, packaging the elements of, as you were saying, Gauri, earlier, like, you have the music to think through, the lighting, the costumes, everything that you're thinking. But there is also the storyboarding of, like, what is it that you're trying to say, right? And what you're trying to say, perhaps, like, is, and the impact that you want to have is different for the different audiences that you engage with and the different countries where you perform, right? So how did you and like Padmaji, you have performed in many countries, and like you were talking about innovation. So how do you bring together like these elements to storyboard something new or to do innovation? And Tarini, you are innovating in many ways, right? So like again, your viewpoints on how do you innovate when you're collaborating with other people and other forms.
So I'll let Tarni take this first, then I will.
Okay. When I interact with other forms, I've mainly collaborated with contemporary dancers, and initially it's more like observation. You need to be able to observe and watch the dance form, either on stage or at performances, so you understand the graph, like the general, movement pattern. And a lot of the times, we just kind of move instinctively. It may not be, okay, we have this in mind, like a concept, and we want to. It's more like, let's move, let's create some sort of 30-second thing, and then out of that, there will be some sort of topic or something that, we can relate it to something. That's usually the physical movement vocabulary. And a lot of it is observation. It's where you watch these shows, as Mom mentioned as well, watching different types of art forms, different other classical dance forms first, which I really love, because for me, wherever my weak areas are, I try to pick up from different dancers and art forms, especially the Abhinaya part. Bharatanatyam, for example, uses a lot of mudras, and it's very crisp, clean mudras, right? There's no messing around. So that's also how we can incorporate that in a more style-specific, of course, to Kathak, but how can that be included? Contemporary dance forms as well, watching that, interacting with the people from that field. I think once you get an understanding of the dance form a bit better, then it's easy to collaborate with them. If you're completely aloof to what the dance form is, what is the style, the movement, the philosophy, then it becomes double the work, to kind of get something out. But whenever I enter the studio, it's always just move instinctively, and then something will come out of it. That's how usually I work, and something we also, when we work on productions, that's usually how it goes. When it comes to like collaborating in another sense, I'll tell you about my fitness, because fitness is the other half of me, and my coaching and strength and conditioning. It has so many cross sections, because one benefits the other. So many, strength training, fitness helps dance, and vice versa. Dance kind of contributes to the fitness, so it's kind of interlinked. One thing, as I mentioned, I'm going to repeat it again, because if any dancers are seeing it, if you are training in a classical dance form, Odissi, Bharatanatyam, I think you have to train in something else, like strength training. Now, I know a lot of dancers, Odissi dancers, for example, are taking up strength training, especially focus on balance, single leg work, a lot of the torso and the lower body, because that's their focus. So whatever your style is, see the kind of main characteristics and focus on that. For example, for me, it's more balance, because we do a lot of things on one leg, a lot of endurance, because we do it for so long, and a lot of lower body strength, because that's the main thing that's working. When we do tatkars, or we do chakkars, doing traveling movements. And so that is, what I would suggest and recommend to everyone, to just try it out. Whatever form of fitness that you like. Ballet dancers love Pilates, because it focuses on lengthening the muscles and the bodies, because it's also style specific to them. So, just look for something. And I think that's, throughout my day, I always do one session which is focused on dance specific strength training related to my dance. And that always benefits me in the studio when I end up doing the solo work or collaborating with dancers, especially with contemporary dancers, because they move in a very different manner. So as a Kathak dancer, you may have your rigid upper body, but you need to use your spine a bit more, use your kind of range of motion. So that comes from all of this cross training that also
Do you
happens.
see yourself, Tarani, choosing themes that are different today than themes that your mom or your grandmother would have chosen?
Yeah. So when it comes to traditional Kathak, I still use the traditional kind of themes and concepts because they are really relevant. Some of them are. The Nayakas are definitely the heroines and heroes, where you can find in every one of us. Different kind of feelings and emotions.
Navrasas.
Yeah, even the emotions
Love
of us. So that's
That is
relevant. So that is all used, definitely. But when you talk about more big scale productions, or if you're looking for a social issue, you need to pick ones which are relevant today, so people can interact. And especially, it also depends on where you're performing. What's your audience? That's a big thing. If you're performing at a big arts center, which is known to have a very strict routine audience who comes in, who's seen so much art and classical art, then you need to perform the true version of Kathak in that sense. But if you're doing it in a more of a festival thing where mass people are coming, no one really knows, or very few know what Kathak is, then you can do more of a social issue, or more of a issue which is related to everyone. Everyone relates to a story. Then it's more attractive to them, and they'll be like, oh wow, this is interesting. Maybe I want to go watch some more Kathak or more Bharatanatyam or other forms of dance. So I think it's very audience specific. You also have to cater to an audience as dancers, otherwise, people won't come, to that particular venue to see you. So that's my approach to topics, and based on audience. Yeah.
Okay, I will, Amrita, I'll just take that up on storyboarding that you came up with. I think there are different entry points for me as work has been. Like when we did Punyatit Bharat, Discovery of India, that was a book. So from there, the segments were created, but the entry point was from the script. The script was the entry point of creating a template and then moving from there. I'm presently working on an idea called Sacred. So the entry point has been looking at those couplets which broke the norms. So, for example, Rahim or Kabir. So those are my exploration entry points. And from there we take it. There was a piece I created called Borderline. And interestingly, my entry point was just one groove. Ta da ta da ta 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 da ta da ta ta. That was a groove I had heard. That became my entry point. From there, it started swelling into a full 20-minute piece. So from there, the stories came. It was about the borderline idea itself. It's about drawing a boundary. So between ideas of women moving away, continents, spaces, refugees. So that swelled into an abstract conceptual idea. Then there are entry points where we talk of Shiva. So if you take a Drupad, Shiva, 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 it becomes a Drupad. So the entry point is the whole conceptual idea of what Shiva is. So you take the iconic representation, you do that. So that becomes another. Then there's a third one where it is just the narrative of a spoken word, where you do the mimetic tradition of that particular kavit, which is recited, and you're emoting it out. So I think that is where we look at different entry points for me. But the concept of dramaturgy, which is basically what it is, the storyboarding, came about when we started looking at more of abstract ideas. Because in abstraction, there are no tug points. It's an abstract idea. For example, if I take an idea of mud, what is mud? And how do I build that as a hour-long performance? So what are the other ingredients I bring in? But this word has been in my head. It's something about something which pulls, something which absorbs, something which is thrown out, something we dig out. So, then you take these representations and you create. So as an artist, I would say it's like a clean canvas. There might be a groove which will trigger some entry. There might be some text you have read. So storyboarding is very, very important. And at the same time, when we do the R&D, we bulk up a lot so that then you can throw them out. That whole process of throwing out is equally important. So then you chisel the piece and then you create a performance around it. But the concept of dramaturgy came when I started working with artists and collaborators in UK, because that's a very, very important. This goes back now nearly 15 years. So we will always have a dramaturg with us to take us through, and he'll stop and ask questions, see whether the lineage of things are happening in the right order, whether you're communicating to the audience, and then that's the role of a dramaturg. So it was a novel idea where here in India we will just be our own masters of doing everything, whereas you outsource it. So you'll outsource your light design, you'll outsource your sound engineer, you'll outsource your costume, you'll outsource your person, and that's when you say, oh wow, there is a whole ecosystem which starts cradling your work. And that support is tremendous. And that's, again, I come back to it. We need to build up these alternate and ancillary support systems in India for artists to create work. Everybody will not be a stage dancer and performer, but you can be a great technician. You could be a writer. You could be a designer. You can do stage design. You can do makeup. You can do so many things which go importantly with a performance. So, yeah.
And I think it's also so much of a mindset, Corey, because when you start talking about mud being an idea, right, and then exploring from there, the different forms, it's just, you need to be open to thoughts like that.
Yes, you have to be open to the thoughts, and this is what the conversation I had with Tarini, and when we create work, I ask them to sit with me, because it's not just about coming and dancing. That anybody can do, but to really understand is you need to start layering it. You need to understand the color. You need to see the texture. You need to feel, if you stand on a mud which is filled with water, what happens to your feet. So it's almost like experiencing something, but out of nothing creating a scale. So I'll just share one small example. Actually, this is a piece which has been performed now for nearly 10 years. It's called Sufi Zen. Idea of fire and ice. So Sufi, the world, and Zen, the other dynamics of it. This was the two ideas which I was given by Meera, an academy, and I created a whole performance in these two ideas, from the idea of how the body moved and how we took the whole element of time, how that scaped it, how we looked at dynamics of movements, what was the music about. So I find this actually quite exciting and challenging, where it is not right there, it's hidden, there's a bit of suspense and a little bit more of romance in creating pieces like this. So this is just another example where nothing, and you start building up block by block. So that's strength, which I think artists have, and then you have to convince the audience to sit through it, and watch it and think about it.
And take your first is take your collaborators in the journey, and then take the audience in the journey.
Yes.
I think, adding to that, I think everyone has their own trigger points, and Mom is a very visual person. If you noticed, all of her things are visual or text based. So it's again, dance is so personalized, and everyone has their own method of working. So from anywhere you can pick up a trigger and it'll create something. Some people are just movement based, they're just kind of move and find their way and do it. Some people are visual, as you said, text, musical. So there are very different trigger points that everyone can create to kind of start their journey of artistic creation, I think.
That's fantastic. So let's take a moment to think a little bit about the ecosystem. I know all of you have alluded to it in many different ways, but the performers obviously live in you talked, Corey, about cradling the performers in many, many different ways, right? You have the ecosystem of collaborators and musicians and other artists who are helping you create. But you also have the institutions, the museums, the supporters, the donors, right? And describe to me a little bit, how you saw this whole ecosystem in the UK. How first of all, I mean, how does somebody tap into an existing ecosystem which exists in the UK, and then let's talk a little bit about what would be needed to create something in India.
Okay. Very interesting, Amrita, because the ecosystem also starts, suppose if we say we start from the government setup, the Arts Council of England actually does funding, grants to support artists. And it's not that only that you're recognized and you are accredited, will you be allowed to apply, which happens in India. Once you're accredited and you're brought in, then you become an artist and then you're given opportunities. Whereas in UK, any artist can apply for a grant. And if their application is strong enough, then they can be part of a funding system that they can, a ladder. So these ladders are very interesting because the ladders give artists confidence and belief in their work. Every work doesn't need to be top there, but there has to be smaller ways to build up. And that I found was extremely refreshing. So the first time when I applied, I actually started questioning myself, oh my God, should I, shouldn't I, this, that. But the ecosystem actually said, no, you should. It is important. You should apply, you should get in, think of this, think of that. And through the process, you evolve. So that process is very important, makes an artist brave and also makes you believe in it. So that was something which I felt was very strong and very democratic. You didn't belong to a particular school or a gharana, but it was a very democratic way of funding given to people. Also, the system of museums and art houses, art centers, which were giving support and residencies to artists. So I thrived for 10 years at the South Bank Center, where we created also fantastic collaborations, but also gave birth to a festival, Alchemy, which was again cross arts and ran for 10 years at the South Bank Center, bringing artists from the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka. So the idea was to create, again, a democratic way of programming, which again I found was quite interesting. It was not, if you remember, we used to do this Festival of India in Russia, and it happened, years ago, where you had the folk artists. It was almost not mirrored on it, but it had many more contemporary dimensions and visual arts and different spaces as it was performed. So that was something which again I thought allowed. What we sometimes lack is collaboration in the art form, because we are mainly trained as soloists, or then we run our own homes and our own schools, which Tardi very interestingly pointed out. The collaborations were very important. And that was something which was again very interesting, because institution wanted to see collaborative artists. Institution encouraged a rendezvous with a beatboxer, and thus the inception of something called Urban One, or with a poet, or with the company which was working in Antarctica on climate change. So, your mind started having, so these trigger points were again very important, because otherwise you can remain in your own cocoon and not see the wider world and see how well even the arts can expand into different horizons. So I think things and opportunities like this need to be created. We have something called learning and participation, which was school workshops, visits of school children to the museums, which I know are happening here as well. But we need to make them as a part of Rolling Stone. This is a regular recurrence that gives the confidence for the children to also believe and feel important. Oh, I actually learned Kathak. I'm not just sitting and doing my maths, but I am a trained Kathak. So when they stand in the pier, they also feel confident about it. So I think these ecosystems, we need to start giving more support and more boost. And yes, again, I come back, the financial support to artists, because they are fantastic younger artists. But if they're not given the boost and the support, they start losing faith. They start looking for other opportunities to sustain themselves. So that's something that we are looking at, and we want to build up, even as a school and as an institution, how we bring other artists to come and collaborate and work with us. So that becomes smaller ecosystem to support a bigger one, which is what I saw in the UK. So that was very, very refreshing for the work that we did out there.
So, Padmaji, I think I'll ask you a question in a slightly different way about your experience. And, you had good, you were very fortunate to have the gurus that you had, but you still, the number of different performances that you did, the number of different countries that you went to, there must have been some amount of creating a network that you would have had to do, which I think a younger artist could learn from. How did you do that? Right. So there is some ladders that your guru would have created, but then beyond that, there would have been many more steps that you would have walked alone and created on your own. So tell us a bit about that.
I think you're on mute. Yeah, unmute yourself.
When I was learning from my gurus, so that time they used to tell me कि तुम इन लोगों के साथ मिलके काम करो. I never had like Gauri had so many students and a group going here and there. So I was never in a group. Mostly Maharaj ji and Mohan Rao ji, they used to tell me this is the group and you have to work with them. Otherwise, I was doing only solo performances. Even abroad also I did solo performance. I did not collaborate with anybody.
But to get the opportunities, there used to be ICCR, there used to be
I was never attached with ICCR.
Okay.
During my time, ICCR was not very, it was not, but nowadays it is in vogue actually. But that time it had just started and I never did any program with ICCR.
I think Amrita, perhaps it was also a period of time when there was more word of mouth and references.
Yes.
So, the whole word, when we talk of network, has become now.
Yeah.
That time there was no networking as such. It was much more of a simpler way of
performing. Simpler way, yes, you're right. Because I used to perform in sammelans. These days you don't see any sammelan. 7 days, 10 days sammelan, like Sursingar ke hote the. There used to be 7-8 sammelan in 1 year. So I used to perform in sammelans in different parts of India, north maybe gayi hu, south maybe. Then so I was never collaboration work. I have not done at all. Dekha jaye to, which Gauri has done, and which is good. Which is good.
I think it just shows that true art and good art doesn't need to be publicized on network. I think if everyone is true to their form and excels and refines their form to a level of artistry and finery, then anyone, anywhere will get that opportunity. And that is basically what has happened in that day. They didn't need social media. They didn't need interacting with people too much, but yeah.
I had one more pointer to make there. Perhaps at that time, way back in the 50s and 60s, there were very fewer dancers, Tarini and Padmaji. Now there are so many dancers. So that is also, the pie was much bigger and fewer dancers. So visibility was much more. And
very true.
There's so many dancers and a smaller pie, which is support system. Therefore, now instead of just coming this way, people are also going out this way, which is great for us because the competition, the feedback, a bit of disruption makes everybody, heart grows fonder when there is a bit of tightness on it. So,
yeah, and I think also all disciples are linked to their guru. When you say, who is this, you always say the disciple of such and such. So there's always a reputation which is carried through the disciple, regardless of the guru. So that I think also is something which is very important and can help a dancer in their career.
Absolutely, the lineage is very important. So let's actually talk a little bit about digital. And Tarini, you said that, okay, social media, yes, there is a certain packaging that happens, but you cannot also ignore it. But also digital I mean, today, at least, like, in the last year and a half, how you perform, how you interact, like, has changed a lot. So do you see the world being different in the next 2 to 5 years? Will it become hybrid like it is becoming in many other areas? What
Yeah,
is
I definitely think so. It's not going to be the same. It is already not, because a lot of people are teaching online. That's one thing everyone has had to adapt to, is teaching either via Zoom, first of all, or starting courses. I've seen people start courses online, full-fledged courses, beginner, intermediate, advanced, etc., which is great because you can actually interact with people from different across the world and different people. But also, it doesn't. I don't think you can learn the true art form online unless you're experienced and you've studied for years and are coming to a person just to top up. But if you're a beginner and starting off, you need to have that physical space, because angles are different, all of that. That is the teaching aspect of it. When it comes to the performing art aspect, there have been a lot of online performances. I've been part of festivals, etc., where you have to cater to the screen. You have to kind of, and in COVID times, you can't interact and collaborate with people. You have to be a light designer. You change the bulb and put in an angle. You have to be a costume, a camera. So I've noticed a lot of people have become more camera savvy. Like, they know like aesthetics, and which is great. I think it's been a learning experience for everyone, not just dancers, but a lot of people who work in the digital content creation field. So it's more camera focused. Before, it was more of an experience where you are there, you're feeling the energy. You could, as an artist, you could make it more holistic by adding a smell, let's say, and interactions were there a little more before, after, all of that. A lot of Kathak is also audience driven. The traditional Kathak is very, you get feedback from the audience. You hear the Baba, or someone has said, yeah, try kariye, kar li. So it's a very organic way of moving, especially in the nritya aspect of Kathak, which is the pure dance part. Here you have less of that. That's definitely something. But more people can again come online. So there's a balance of it all. But I think when you talk about the performance part, we also have to look at the economics of it, right? Because dancers are not. It's going to be hard for dancers to just do free performances. It will not sustain them. So that is why I think, as dancers as a whole, as a community, we need to come together and decide that we should all have paid performances, because if the audience has an opportunity between paid and free, where would they go? They would go to the free one, and then dancers would lose out. So I think, as to benefit everyone, we need to either create a community or something where we kind of leverage the online platform and sustain artists, which is already a tough issue with our general thing, just to sustain them in their daily life, to keep continuing doing their good work and keep up the practice, etc. If the online is going to be a big part, I think, which it will be. I don't know if that's fortunate, unfortunate, but it definitely will be. But going back to it, I don't think anything replaces the stage ambience and stage experience for an artist as well as an audience member. It's a completely different experience.
It's an experiential medium. We could continue for hours more, I feel, but all good things need to end, and we are already way beyond whatever we had said we would have this conversation for. So as we end, let me just ask each one of you, what is a message that you would like to give to the young creators out there, and what is your life mantra that you think helped you, which would help the women who are tuning in and listening to us?
I would say, if you have talent of dancing, because we are talking of dance, if you have the talent and you have energy, so you should continue your activity till such time that you are unable to do. So that will keep you healthy, keep you in good spirits. So this is my mantra. Even today, this is all whatever I do, practice. This is all my training of my early days. The footwork, the hand movements. You go on doing that, and you will feel young from here. Maybe not from your yes body, but so it is very very necessary that you should, whatever you have learned, you have a talent, you should continue it and keep going. That will take you far. This is my mantra.
Thank you, Padmaji. Gauri? Or maybe let me ask Tarani and then we'll come back to Gauri.
Sure. The few things that I've experienced and I'm still experiencing is consistency in what, and it's not specific to dance, it's for everyone out there. Whatever you do and you have a passion to do, or you have a will to do, just be consistent. Even may not be too big, just keep doing it day in, day out, day in, day out. And that is something I did with my riyas. So that's one thing for sure. And showing up, and that links together. Showing up for yourself. No one else is going to show up for you sometimes. You need to show up to your work, show up to your riyas, show up to your creative practice, show up to your workouts. And there will always be a benefit to showing up for yourself and just keeping yourself mentally, physically healthy, tuned, and consistency in showing up kind of helps you with that.
Fantastic, and so much needed for the younger generation, right? Sometimes.
And Amrita, I will go much more in generic terms, that I want to say that we should not live our life, we should never apologize for what we are and what we do and how we do it. That's one. And I also feel that we got to be long distance runner, and I'm talking mainly from my practice, not just a sprinter, but a long distance runner. And for being the long distance runner, we require the zeal, the perseverance, and the regularity, which I know sometimes can be mundane, but it's okay. It's okay to shift around and keep going that. So I would say for me, dance is the mantra of life. It keeps me inspired. It keeps me challenged. And I'll say this as the last note. Each day is a new day. Each day is a new dawn. You readdress it. You park the back, what has happened, and you readdress it. And you refresh yourself, and you be grateful for where we are, what we are doing, how we are, and the joy that we can give in a small way to the people around us. And that's, I think, the most important mantra for me. And that's what I take away with a smile.
Fantastic, Gauri. And I think so much more truer in the past year than ever before. Right. So it's been a fantastic conversation. I couldn't thank each one of you enough for this wonderful exchange that we've had, the stories that you've shared, and the authenticity with which you've brought together your experiences from times. So thank you again. Very, very privileged to be here. And with that, I think we have a wonderful closing performance of Padmaji, Gauri, and Tarani together. So let's see that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Gauri, will you play the video, please?
Many times I ponder over the details of actual experience, its balanced attitude, distinctive strand of life, and experience it through the principles and determination in integrating movements of life around us. It's impulsive, it's embracing, it's delightful, and it's giving. I also warmly acknowledge all who have helped and inspired me to pursue the right path. A great world of beauty Ma has pushed me into for happy dwelling and the creative analysis and the journey I'm on. A Nirmohi. I may not pursue the question any longer, for my purpose here is simply to hint that we have to be true to the facts as experienced, talk about them as clearly as we can. Every endeavor is to better our knowledge of the form and the person in action. A samvad not just with the people outside, but within yourself, with yourself. Ma has remained the same. No filters in comments. Strict in many ways while teaching. For Ma, learning did have its fair run of ups and downs and the choices she made. But it challenged her, both physically and mentally, to keep probing, inquiring, and carving out a niche for herself in this wild world. Between traditions, methodology, unstructured learning, experimental approach to compositions, fostering a carriage of a form, forging forward over a vast speck. In Ma's words, I quote, "Have been lucky to have wonderful gurus whom I trusted to the fullest. Never ever had any problems about their integrity. They taught me to the fullest with ease and truth. Never had any questions about their teachings. No questions asked, and in total surrender. Learning never ends, and I'm still learning, and I'm teaching. Dance is formless. It's the doer who executes an idea through the instrument of the body, and the grammar learnt." I unquote.
That was wonderful. And thank you again, Gauri, as well as Padmaji and Tarini. And with that, a huge thanks to our audience today also. And, people who've seen this today, but people who will also see this in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Good wishes to everyone. Let's keep at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.